closely with our next guest over the last 8 months, she has gained my utmost respect and admiration. Rainie Torrance is the Assistant Utilities Manager for the City of Needles and one of the most persistent and dedicated people I've ever met. Hi, Rainie. It's so good to see you again.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you. So I just want to discuss kind of from the beginning where you and I started. In January of this year, we received an email from you requesting our assistance with funding for a grant application. And in that email, you laid out very simply the urgency of your request and the reasons why. So can you explain to our listeners what steps the city had taken before reaching out to Rebuild SoCal?
Yeah, definitely. So prior to us reaching out to Rebuild SoCal, we were actively seeking grant applications. And I've done grant writing in my other jobs, and so I had experience doing it. And so I thought, we have a huge need in Needles. And so I said, well, I'm going to take on this task and go above and beyond for my community. I'm going to try to find funding for us. And I wasn't getting anywhere, or the places I were getting, they had a huge match component, which we couldn't meet. And so I started putting fillers out to different contacts I had in the grant industry world, and came across your contact as a resource that could potentially help us. But until this year, I cannot recall the last time the city had a grant.
Wow.
So they don't get very many funding for any type of projects.
No, it's very hard. It's a long process. It's a tedious process. I mean, after going through it.
Yeah, it definitely takes some skill and a lot of time.
You're right. So after Rebuild SoCal got involved, you and I had several discussions on what types of funding measures were out there and which ones would be best suited for the type of grant that you were requesting. The grant application process is very tedious, as we just talked about. Do you have any advice that you would give our listeners who may not have gone through this process? Should they need to reach out to get help for their community?
Outreach. It's all about connections and who you know. And I without this partnership with Rebuild, so many of the opportunities we've gotten, we probably wouldn't have gotten. And so it's important to have contacts and people that know people. Marcy, with Rebuild, a lot of senators and people that, just Rainie from Needles doesn't know. Mm-hmm. And so that partnership really helps with every opportunity. So for anybody that's looking for any type of funding, get contacts, get resources, get people to build your team, because that's how you succeed. It's not just one player on a team, it's your team that you have behind you that helps.
Right. You're
and so
right.
That's the only way I think anything can be successful.
Right. So Rainie, with that being said, what do you see for the future of Needles?
So I think the future for Needles is very promising and bright through the partnership that we've built with Rebuild SoCal. It's opened so many opportunities for us. We've now got our name out there on the platform, and I think people notice that, Needles is here, and we are going to fight for funding, not only for water, but any needs that our community needs. And this partnership, we've now gotten our name to where, we have people from Metropolitan Water District and Coachella District calling to help us because they have funding for drought. And so I think it's really stepped Needles up to a higher playing field, which I think is really important.
It's so important, and we are so happy to be able to help you with that.
Right. And so now going forward, we still have water projects. Like, this fight for Needles is not over, and it's far from over. And as long as I'm here or my team's here, or we have this great, amazing partnership with you guys at Rebuild, we're going to continue to succeed, and we're going to continue to get grant funding. This well is a great project that we got funding for, but we have more infrastructure problems, and I'm sure every other jurisdiction is seeing it. Deteriorating pipes, bad equipment, lacking proper equipment. Those are all types of projects that we need funding for. And we're going to continue to put our name out there and get noticed and get people to start. This fair share of equal funding distribution is an issue, and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be fixed in the state of California.
You're absolutely right. And that is why Rebuild was formed in the beginning, was to make sure that Southern California got their fair share of the federal and state money. So we're happy to see that it's happening, and it couldn't have happened to a nicer community, in my opinion.
Oh, thank you.
And we look forward to working with Needles on any future project that we can help with.
That'd be great.
Rainie, before we get into the details on how you and I started to work together, walk me through the day you received the news that the State Water Resources Control Board had awarded the funding to the City of Needles for your new well.
So prior to receiving the award notification, we had been working on the application and requirements from the State Water Resources Board for several months prior. It's a very rigorous and detailed process through the State Water Board. There's a lot of hoops, if you will, that you have to jump through to please different aspects of the grant application, such as environmental review, financial review, and each department has their own set of questions and requirements. And so it took us some time to get through those processes successfully. There was some actions that our city council had to take that eventually sped up this process. And all the work that Rebuild did also on the backside really helped speed up this process for us. But I remember receiving notification from our contact at the State Water Board, our project manager, and he had stated that we officially completed all of the necessary requirements.
Okay.
And that the official memo was sitting on the desk of the deputy director. And I remember sitting there reading that and going, oh my goodness, it's on his or her desk. Like, where is this person? Like, can I drive up there? Why is taking so long? And so I waited about a day or two, and I'm not a very patient person. And as a small town, like when you want an answer, you just go knock on a door and you get an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started researching the org chart of the State Water Board, and I found the deputy director and the executive director, and I started sending emails. Historically, we were sending emails to both of them, notifying them of when the well went out and the emergency declarations that council issued. But I finally sent an email and said, I received notification that this is on your desk. I expressed, wanting to see that expedited as soon as possible, given another heat wave was coming. And I know drilling a well takes time and there's processes to go through. And
Right.
So, in my head, it's like, we can't go through another summer. And it's like, we got to get started on this.
Mm-hmm.
And the only time we can really do that is now. And so I sent that email, and by the end of the day, I received the email back from the actual deputy director himself, acknowledging that he had signed the award notification.
That's
and that
amazing.
We would get the final approval within a few days. And so my heart, when you just read those letters and you're just like, my goodness, this person responded back to me, thanked me for all the work that we did and the partnerships that we got, and, said, here you go. You got it. And I was just like, your heart just drops at that moment,
Of course.
Especially like when you're from the community,
Mm-hmm.
You realize the impacts that well is going to have, not only for me, but, other generations to come. Like these wells will be here, and so a lot of people, residents, businesses, tourists are all going to benefit from this well for generations to come. And I think being a part of that process has just been amazing for me.
Oh, well, we're so happy, and we're so happy to have been a part of it. And it couldn't have happened, in my opinion, to a nicer city and a nicer group of people. I've had some great conversations, and you and I have worked really well together, and I'm hoping that we will continue to work together in the future.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rainie. So we're also here today with Mr. Bryan Hickstein, who is the Chief Water Operator at the City of Needles. Bryan, how long have you been with the city?
Going on 2 years.
Okay. So you know everything there is to know about the water system, the ins and the outs, and the good, the bad.
As much as I can learn in 2 years, I do, yes.
Okay. All right. So what I want to talk to you about just a little bit is on July 21st of this year, your only water source failed during a severe thunderstorm that blew through. Can you walk us through the next 24 hours that followed?
So approximately 7 p.m., I got a phone call from my on-call guy that we had no power, a significant part of the city, and it was taken down the well. He then immediately called the electric on-call and had them come out and see if they could assess the situation and of course they were already out with down lines, trees on lines, things of that nature. And the lead electric guy, Justin Scott, had come over to the well to see if we could help him figure out why there was no power at the well site, and contacted his guys to see where they were working. Roughly an hour later, back and forth phone calls with me. I was on my way down here to help. I live about 30 minutes away, so I got a phone call that they had restored power, but couldn't get the controls to function on them.
Okay.
And so it was somewhat of a troubleshooting thing. And this is a newer piece of equipment that we have at the well. It's a variable frequency drive that operates that well. And my operator had never, the one that was on site, had never really gotten into the mechanics of one of these things. So I arrived, roughly an hour after the initial report of the failure. It's 122 plus degrees, of course,
So it was a cooler night.
And we were at end of shift, so everybody'd been gone home, and now we're coming back out of the woodwork from home to see if we can get our water system back up and running. We, in a scenario like this, we run off of our storage. We have roughly 4.5 million gallons of storage, which, depending on how hot it is, how much is consumed, lasts a certain amount of time. 36 so hours, we can stay fluid easily enough. Anyhow, we got down to the well. I met Justin. Michael Evans come down. He's another electrician. And we got into the mechanics of the cabinet, and we found we had lost a control fuse, and we replaced the fuse. Of course, that wasn't the issue. There was another issue that had caused it. And we spent the next 5-6 hours chasing through the electrical components in the cabinet.
And this is all in the middle of the night, right?
Yeah. I think it got down to maybe 105 that night. Yeah. So, we're out there with the trucks and the lights, and, and we'd all been at work since 5 o'clock in the morning. So, we're
tired.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we worked, through the night until 1:30 in the morning or so. We finally were at our wits' end. We started making phone calls, and I had Rainie hunting people, Rainie Torrance. She works with us, and we had her hunting electricians with experience in control circuitry, and the end result was we had a direct short in the cabinet that was caused by a fault from a tree branch that had crossed a couple of electrical lines, and they cleared that, but it had damaged a component in the cabinet and put it direct to ground. So there was no way for us to reactivate the circuitry to get the pump working again.
Okay.
And I believe it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I sent everybody else home. And I finally got a gentleman from Lake Havasu that's been doing these types of controls for 40 plus years, troubleshooting and repairing. And he was very, very familiar with VFDs. And he met me out there at 3:30 in the morning, and me and him worked on it until I believe it was about 8 o'clock the next morning. We finally found the bad component. It was a magnetic contactor that had shorted out. And it was the very last component in the box. So,
of course.
And by this time it's breaking over 100 degrees again, and we're still, So he went back to Havasu started hunting for parts for them. They said this is a fairly new piece of equipment we installed when we had our last emergency, the D Street Bridge or whatever that.
Mm-hmm.
We installed this VFD so we could run that bypass line because it's a smaller line. We had this little well done. Well, it being a newer piece of equipment like that, we don't have a lot of spare parts on the ship.
Right.
And it being a newer piece of equipment, it's hard to get the spare parts. So we're still ordering parts for it. But we started hunting about 8:30, and it took us till about 1:00 in the afternoon through another contract company that we work with. They actually work our wastewater side. He found us a component in Phoenix, which is roughly a 4-hour drive. So I kept hunting for closer. Meanwhile, I sent one of my guys to Phoenix after the part, and luckily, our guy on the other end sent somebody this way with it, bought it for us, and sent somebody this way with it.
And I know who that was because I do believe that Metropolitan Water District had been in contact with Dave Sorem, who is a trustee on our board. And from what I understood, I think Metropolitan had actually ordered you another part to keep on hand so that if that ever happened again, he told those people to keep that part on the shelf for you, just in case that ever happened.
Oh,
so I wasn't sure if you were aware of that.
No, I wasn't aware of that, but thank you very much for that. Anyhow, we still kept hunting, everything local, Vegas, anywhere within an hour and a half drive from here, while we were trying to get the part from Phoenix. And the guy that helped me troubleshoot it, Dave, I can't remember the name of his company, but he went back to get his guys going, and he was still looking for parts for us. And come about 6:30 that night, the following day.
So now we're 24 hours into it, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I got a call from my guy that he was back about 30 minutes outside of town. That get the contractor back out here. Let's get the well, and I'll have the part there for him in about 30 minutes. And I don't remember the exact time, but it was roughly the 25th hour that we got the part installed and the well back online and running.
Just in time for you to go home, shower, and clock in for work.
Yes.
Oh, Brian. That shouldn't have that issue.
No.
So that is why we want to help in any way that we can. And we're glad that you got the part, but I'm sad that it happened. But I'm glad you got it fixed, and we're going to see what we can do to make sure that doesn't happen again.
That's great. I appreciate it very much. And hopefully with this new well coming and stuff that we've got coming, that'll make things a little easier for us in the future. And we won't be stuck in a scenario like that again. So
yes,
we've got a lot of failing infrastructure here in Needles that I'm learning about as I go, and it's been an ongoing battle the entire 2 years I've been here. It seems I get something repaired, fixed, replaced, and something else fails. So
right.
It seems to me that everything here is at least 50, 60 years old, and these things weren't designed to last that long. So,
we definitely have a problem with our infrastructure in California, and that is something that I know the state and the feds are working on. So hopefully we can keep plugging away and just go from city to city and get some help for you guys.
we appreciate everything y'all done for us, and I look forward to working with you in the future for sure.
Well, we're not going anywhere. Thank you, Brian. It was nice speaking with you today.
Thank you.
Next, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dave Sorem, who is a trustee from Rebuild SoCal. Hi, Dave. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Marcy.
Good. Thanks for being here today. We appreciate it. So, Dave, Bryan Hickstein from the City of Needles told us a little bit about the workings of the well and what he needs if an emergency should occur like it did in July. As an engineer, could you tell our listeners more about the actual mechanics of a well?
Sure. I don't know the exact diameter that they plan on having out there, but usually it's somewhere around like a 36 to 48 inch diameter hole that they drill. And then what they do is they put in the well casing that can be 18 inch or whatever. And then that casing is perforated, and it's usually stainless steel from my memory. It's been a while. And then around the casing, they put what they call well rock or dry pack. And then, they drill it down to a depth. And I think, if I remember right, Needles, the groundwater is fairly shallow. They're probably going to go down 250, 300 feet. And then they'll go ahead and clean the well or test it, and push water down in it, pump it back out, and keep on doing that until it gets clear. And then they pump it up to their reservoirs. And then it's a gravity feed system, from what I understand. And basically that's it.
It's interesting. I'm sure there's many of us, me included, who really have never heard it explained like that. So thank you. I appreciate that. So Dave, as a trustee for Rebuild SoCal, can you explain how this could potentially impact other disadvantaged communities that have impaired water systems?
As you know, through the Central Valley especially, there's been such a drawdown on the groundwater, sometimes 60 to 100 feet, and a lot of them have to be re-drilled. And I think what we're doing, or what we helped with Needles, will be beneficial to other disadvantaged communities. You read about it all the time in some of the water articles and such like that, where they're having a tough time and the wells have gone dry. So hopefully, with your work or our work with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, or I should say State Water Resources Control Board, they'll see that we're here to help them, and we can possibly sort out some of those disadvantaged communities that need help, and we go on from there. I don't know how much money is left in Prop 1. We'll soon find out. I think they're re-upping it again. But I think this could be beneficial for a lot of those communities.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I know there are so many, like you said, there's been so many articles that have come out recently about cities whose wells have run dry or they have run out of their water supply. So I think you're right. I think that this could potentially just be the beginning for these disadvantaged communities. Now that the City of Needles has received the funding for their new well, you and I both know that it's only the beginning for them. And as an engineer, I was wondering if you could explain to our listeners what Needles will be in need of in the near future for their water system.
I think priority one is to replace some of those existing water mains. A lot of it, from what I understand, and I haven't spent that much time out there, but when I was briefly there, they explained to me a lot of the lines are cast iron, paper thin, and they need to be replaced. I know they've done some of it, but the two major things that I saw is, one, they have a day and a half of storage, and that's far too little. They need at least 7 days, according to some of the major water companies, and I really believe they need that. The second thing is that their main line is a 16-inch asbestos cement pipe with less than 2 foot of cover. I am really surprised that hasn't blown more than it has already. Was it 2 years ago that they lost that? And I don't know how many hundreds of yards they put onto the freeway, and they had to close the freeway down. So those are the two major ones. And then later on, I think they need to do a whole replacement of their water lines, the main lines.
Right. Yeah, Rainie Torrance had talked about that earlier. So yes, I think there is a lot of work to be done, and I am hopeful that there is a lot of money sitting in different pots out there, especially, not only state, but I know federal level, there is a lot of different pots of money coming out as well. So hopefully they'll get the help that they need. You have anything else you'd like to add before we close this?
Yeah, I do. I think that, with your help, they'll be able to get some of that money. The work that you did in finding the safer funds, and with Prop 1 coming up, and hopefully with the infrastructure bill of 1.2 trillion. There'll be some more. And just go ahead and help them try to get that money and get work for our union contractors.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Dave.
Yep, thank you very much.
And
Appreciate
thank you
it.
for chatting with us and giving our listeners some more insight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, take care. This concludes our mini-series on the water emergency in Needles, California. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed these episodes. Tune in again in 2 weeks for another new episode of the Rebuild SoCal Zone.